Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Max Gomez. He is the president of CALPO, the Canadian Association of Latino Peace Officers. He's a member of the OPP, and he was a winner of TLN's 10 Most Influential Hispanic Canadians in 2019. Max, thank you for joining us. Can you talk to us about the significance of winning this award?
It was fantastic, actually. It came as a surprise, and it was great. It was great to be at a place where we could represent the Latin American and Hispanic group of CALPO in spaces where perhaps we didn't have access to before. Just going to the ceremony was wonderful. Just being in a powerhouse of Latin American and Hispanic leaders from across Canada, and really proud of our community, proud of what we've been able to accomplish, sometimes under some difficulty, we'll say, but how we're growing in influence and in service in Canada was really fantastic to see.
And I think we always talk about having more representation in mainstream media, in sports, but we never really think about the importance of having representation in the judicial system. I would love for you to tell us about the work that CALPO does and how it is benefiting our community.
Sure, absolutely. It's really an honor to serve Canada as a whole. We'll say, if we're speaking about the association, we have our last names on our uniforms, and that's the Canadian flag there. However, our immigrant experience brings a lot more to that from the Latin American perspective. CALPO works in multiple aspects, internally in the development of our members, almost as a leadership network for every officer or whatever agency, municipal, provincial, federal, to take an active role, a leadership role within their agency to make change. In the promotion processes, and to build awareness of the Latin American and Hispanic community that they serve within their services. We also partner, encourage our partners, we'll say, or stand with our partners in engagement of the Latin American community. So from the policing perspective, multiple police services have formal engagement processes, we'll say, or relationships with multiple community groups. Something that you will find is that very few of those community groups are actually Latin or Hispanic focused. Very proud to be working with the Peel Regional Police Service here in the GTA. Chief Duriapa is actually leading the charge in instituting the very first Latin American Chiefs Advisory Board. So a group of Latin American leaders from the Peel region that will have access and sit at the table with the Chief of Police to bring the needs of that community to the Chief of Police. So we stand with them, and that's some of the work we do internally. Externally, we work in recruitment initiatives, community engagement initiatives, social media initiatives, crime prevention initiatives. So it's a whole array of things that our members are involved in, all with the goal of representing the Latin American and Hispanic Canadian community in our new country, in this land that we are privileged to serve.
I think crime prevention is a very important topic because, unfortunately, because of the socioeconomic situation of a lot of our members of our community, sometimes they can be more prone to domestic violence, to labor trafficking, even sometimes to just falling victim to stereotypes. And I would love to know, on the CALPO side, what does our community need to kind of bridge this gap and prevent that these crimes are happening?
It's a great question. It's a very broad question. I think when we speak about very serious issues like intimate partner violence or domestic violence, we really need to, that's an ill that sometimes communities carry from place to place, from their origin nation to wherever they immigrate to. And those are things that we need to continue to work on. Isolation plays a big part. Being new to a country plays a big part. The stress that immigrating to a new place or moving to a new place, the stress that places on families and how it impacts the relationship and even the children, right? What do we need to do with that? We need to be able to report that. We need to lose the shame and the fear of perhaps being retaliated against in an immigration system, right? Or even financially, that's a big impact as well. But there are community agencies who are funded and designed to help victims of domestic violence, who of course are mostly women, unfortunately, as it is around the world, overcome, get out of those domestic violence situations, and just turn a leaf. And it doesn't matter that it doesn't mean that that relationship is over, but it does mean that we have an expectation of what families, how people treat each other in a family nucleus. So domestic violence, issues of labor trafficking, very important. If it's too good to be true, if it sounds too good to be true, then it's probably not true. You really need to be aware of that.
And what strategies do people have to get out of a labor trafficking situation? You know, you came here with this dream, with this promise, and then all of a sudden you realize it's not the reality.
You need to run. You need to report. You need to understand that the Canadian justice system is there to help. Don't compare the Canadian justice system in all of its flaws, of course, because it isn't perfect, as perhaps one that you're more used to in your host nation or where you come from. So report it. If someone is controlling how much money you make, how much you eat, where you go, what time you board a bus, where you work, or even if you have access to a doctor or not, those are some signs, and you need to report that.
And is it safe for someone to report that? Because I think a lot of people will worry that they might get deported or that it might affect their situation in the country.
There's always that fear. I think something that is important to understand as well, and I think perhaps media and Hollywood sold this story of the immigration raids in the middle of the night where everybody boards a bus and then gets deported. And maybe that's the only experience they've had just through watching that on television. The police are not the immigration system. I know very little about the immigration system. I don't enforce immigration law. The police doesn't do that. There is the Canadian Border Services, there is the CBSA, who have officers that do that, inland officers that do that, and they have an important work to do. But if there's a crime that needs to be investigated in Canada, in this particular case, labor trafficking, that's the jurisdiction of the police, and that's what we investigate. If we need to bring in other resources to complete that investigation, we will. But no one should fear deportation and that be a cause for not reporting a crime to police.
And off camera, you had mentioned a story where it was really important for your presence to be there after a terrible car accident where they needed to tell their story in their language. And I think it really testifies to the importance of having police officers or people in the judicial system that speak Spanish. Can you talk about the opportunities that our community has to perhaps participate, join, or become an active member of CALPO or of a federal, municipal, or provincial police force?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's been a better time to become a police officer, at least in the province of Ontario, and for sure in Canada. Not only police, but customs and immigration, a member of the CBSA, correctional systems, even probation and parole. That linguistic and cultural awareness and representation amongst all levels of enforcement and in the judicial system is key, because we, through linguistic diversity, we're able to tell victims of crimes, we'll say victims, of course, are able to tell their story in their language. And the cultural competence will then have an officer, under most circumstances, be able to tell that story with a cultural context. And that is key. The experience at how CALPO all began in 2012, it was called the Hampstead Fatal, which is a multi-victim casualty crash near Stratford. 11 people lost their lives. 10 of those were migrant workers, Hispanic. I was working nearby and I received a call from my dispatcher. It's like, hey, listen, you speak Spanish. There's 2 victims at the hospital speak Spanish. We need you to go to the hospital and take their statements before they die. And that's when it really hit me. It hit me because, I went there, took their statements, but they also said goodbyes to their families. I was also privileged to carry the goodbyes and the I love yous to their children. So that responsibility made me really understand that everyone needs that opportunity, and that's where CALPO works in the diversification linguistically and culturally of the justice system within Canada. So everybody has that opportunity.
Amazing, Max. Well, thank you for the work that you do for our community. And for everyone back home, you can visit tln.ca/top10 to nominate this year's edition of TLN's 10 Most Influential Hispanic Canadians.